Sophia Reynolds didn't knock. That was the first thing Claire Whitmore remembered later. Not the words, not the threat wrapped inside polished legal language, not even the envelope Sophia set on the kitchen table like it was nothing. What she remembered was that the woman didn't knock. She rang the bell once, and when Claire opened the door, still holding a dish towel and wearing paint-stained sweatpants, Sophia looked her up and down the way people look at something they've already decided doesn't matter. "We need to talk about the baby," Sophia said. Claire's hand tightened on the door frame. She was 6 months pregnant. Nobody in Vincent's world was supposed to know. Sophia smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Invite me in, Claire. I drove 2 hours. The least you can do is offer me coffee." That was 8 months ago. And standing now in the fluorescent corridor of Boston Children's Hospital at 11:40 on a Tuesday night, Claire would give anything to go back to that moment and slam the door in Sophia Reynolds' face. If you've ever stood in a hospital hallway at midnight, holding your child's entire world in your hands, and felt completely alone, drop your city in the comments below. I want to know where this story finds you. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe and stay till the end, because this story goes places I promise you will not see coming. The fever had started that afternoon. Claire had noticed it the way mothers notice things, not from a thermometer, not from a textbook symptom. She noticed it because Lillian stopped grabbing at things. 8-month-old Lillian grabbed at everything. The TV remote, Claire's hair, the edge of whatever coffee mug was within arm's reach. Lillian had been grabbing and pulling and putting things in her mouth since the day she figured out her own hands existed, and that Tuesday afternoon she just stopped. She lay in the bouncy seat near the window and stared at the ceiling with glassy, distant eyes, and Claire's stomach dropped before she'd even crossed the room. 104.1. Claire took the reading twice because she didn't believe it the first time. She called the pediatric nurse line while simultaneously pulling Lillian's winter coat off the hook by the door and searching for her keys with one hand. The nurse on the phone was calm, professional. She asked Claire to describe the symptoms, and Claire did, her voice staying level even though her hands were shaking. High fever in infants under 12 months. Lethargic, not eating. The nurse said bring her in, and something in the careful neutrality of that voice made Claire's throat close up. She drove to Boston Children's with Lillian strapped in the rear-facing car seat, checking the rear-view mirror at every red light. Lillian's eyes were open but unfocused. Claire talked to her the whole way. Stupid things, small things, the kind of running commentary she'd developed over 8 months of solo parenthood, because silence in an apartment with only a baby for company became its own kind of weight. "We're almost there, baby. You're okay. You're gonna be okay. Mama's got you." She didn't know if she was talking to Lillian or herself. The ER intake moved faster than she expected once they saw the temperature. A nurse took Lillian from Claire's arms with practiced efficiency, and for 3 seconds Claire stood there with empty hands in the middle of the intake area, feeling like something had been physically removed from her chest. They put Lillian in a small room with a warming lamp and monitors and a crib with rails, and a doctor came in, young, competent, speaking in the measured tones of someone trained to deliver information without triggering panic, and began asking questions. Symptoms. Duration. Any recent illness. Any contact with sick individuals. And then, does Lillian have any known family medical history on the paternal side? Any hereditary cardiac conditions, blood disorders, or immune deficiencies we should know about? Claire heard the question. She understood the question. She stood very still for a moment, and then she said, "Can you give me 5 minutes?" The doctor looked at her, not unkindly. "Take what you need," she said, and stepped out. Claire sat down in the chair beside Lillian's crib and looked at her daughter's small face. The monitors beeped with steady indifference. Lillian's chest rose and fell. Her eyelashes, which she had gotten from her father, that specific dark thickness, rested against her cheekbones. Claire reached into her coat pocket and found her phone. She had not deleted his number. She told herself it was practical. Emergencies existed, legal matters existed. A clean divorce didn't mean you burned every bridge behind you. She told herself that for 14 months without examining it too closely. She found his contact. She stared at it. Vincent Calloway. No title, no description. Just the name, the way she'd entered it years ago, when he was just a man she was falling for, and not yet the thing he became, and not yet the thing she had to leave. She thought about all the reasons not to call. She had a list. She'd been maintaining it, consciously and unconsciously, for over a year. He would take over. He would make every decision about Lillian's care without asking. He would arrive with men and phones and authority, and suddenly a pediatric hospital room would feel like a boardroom. He would look at Lillian and see a vulnerability, something to be protected and controlled, and he would wall that child inside his world the way he'd tried to wall Claire inside it, and she had fought too hard to get out to hand her daughter back in. She thought about what Sophia Reynolds had said, standing in her kitchen in that careful client management voice. She thought about Lillian's eyelashes against her cheekbones. She pressed call. It rang twice. Claire. His voice was the same. That was the thing about Vincent. He sounded exactly like himself at 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday in January, as he did in every other circumstance. Controlled, present, like he'd been awake waiting, even though she knew that wasn't possible. She'd prepared a sentence. She'd constructed it in the 4 minutes she'd been sitting in this chair. She was going to say, Lillian is sick and the doctors need your medical history. Clean, factual, no room for anything else. What came out was, she has a fever. She's in Boston Children's. They need your medical history and I didn't. She stopped, pressed her fingers against her mouth for half a second. I should have told you. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. She's listed on the birth certificate. You're listed. I should have. I'm sorry, that's not. She exhaled hard. Vincent, you're listed on her birth certificate. They need to know if there's anything on your side. Cardiac. Blood. Anything. The silence on the line lasted 4 seconds. She counted them. What hospital? He said. Boston Children's, I already said. What floor? 3. Pediatric emergency. But Vincent, I'm not, this isn't an invitation to, I'm coming. The call ended. Claire held the phone in both hands and looked at Lillian, who had drifted into shallow, feverish sleep under the warming lamp, and said nothing because there was nothing to say. She had made the call. The call had a consequence. The consequence had a name and a voice, and was currently, presumably, moving toward this hospital at whatever speed the feared boss of the Callaway organization moved when he decided to go somewhere. She had 40 minutes, maybe. She knew how he drove. She used the time to speak to the doctor, to provide what family history she could from her own side, to sign consent forms and answer questions and hold Lillian's tiny hand through the crib rails while the monitors reported their information in small green numbers. She used the time to breathe, to remind herself of the terms she had decided. He could have the medical history conversation. He could be present for that. But she had walked out of that marriage with one thing intact, her own judgment, and she was not surrendering it in a hospital room at midnight because her daughter had a fever. She was prepared for a lot of things when the door opened 43 minutes later. She was not prepared for the look on his face. Vincent Callaway was not a man who looked uncertain. In 12 years of knowing him, 3 dating, 4 married, the rest untangling the aftermath, she had seen him angry, strategic, cold, occasionally and surprisingly tender, but never uncertain. He filled rooms with a particular quality of attention that made people feel simultaneously seen and assessed, and he did not carry himself like a man who questioned his right to be wherever he was. He walked into room 307 in a dark wool coat, no tie, his jaw unshaved, and he stopped 2 steps inside the doorway. His eyes went to the crib, to Lillian. And his face did something Claire had never seen it do. It simply opened. All the architecture of control he had spent decades constructing just fell away for one unguarded second, and what was underneath it was not what she expected. Not the calculation of a man assessing a new variable, not possessiveness, not even the specific tenderness she'd sometimes seen him deploy like a tool. What was on Vincent Callaway's face was the raw, unprocessed shock of a man looking at something he hadn't known he was missing. He stood there for 3 full seconds before he moved again. Claire watched him cross to the crib and look down at Lillian, and she made herself stay in her chair against the wall because the alternative was standing up, and she didn't trust her legs just then. How long? He said. His voice was different. She noticed it. The fever. How long? Started this afternoon, 104. They've gotten it down to 102 in the last hour. They're running tests, viral panel, blood work, They want to rule out anything serious before they... Does she know I'm here? The question landed wrong, and then Claire realized what he meant. Not does Lillian, alert and comprehending, know. Just, is there any part of this that reaches her? She's been in and out, Claire said. She's not in pain. They think it's viral, probably. He pulled the chair from the corner of the room and positioned it beside the crib without asking and sat down. He didn't look at Claire again for a long moment. He looked at Lillian, the dark eyelashes, the small curled fist, the way her chest moved. Vincent, Claire said carefully, the doctors need... I'll talk to them. He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. I'll call my physician tonight. He has my complete history. He'll transmit whatever they need directly. It's almost midnight. He'll answer. She believed him. Of course she believed him. That was never the problem. They sat in an odd, suspended quiet for several minutes. The monitors beeped. Somewhere down the corridor, a child was crying and being soothed. The hospital maintained its particular nighttime atmosphere of controlled urgency, the sense of a building that did not sleep but had learned to hold its tension at a lower pitch after hours. Why Boston children specifically? Vincent said. He wasn't looking at her. I live in Boston. I know where you live. She felt something tighten in her chest. Have you been? No. He said it immediately, flatly. I'm not... I meant I knew you'd moved here. After. Someone mentioned it. Someone in your organization mentioned it, Claire said. He didn't answer, which was an answer. Vincent. She kept her voice level. Quiet, because Lillian was sleeping and this was a hospital, and she was not going to have this conversation at volume. Why does anyone in your organization know where I live? Because you have my name. I have my name, she said. I took it back. Lillian has my name. He said it without aggression, just as a fact. Which means Lillian has enemies I created. Which means I need to know where she is. Claire looked at him. At the side of his face, the set of his jaw. 8 months. Her daughter had existed for 8 months, and this man, who had enemies capable of finding a mother and infant through a name alone, had not known about her, had not known to look, had not been able to look. That was Sophia's calculus. Claire understood it now with the clarity of sleeplessness and fluorescent light. Sophia had come to that apartment not to protect Lillian. She had come because she knew exactly what Vincent was saying right now, and she needed it not to be said. A child complicated the organization's exposure. A child meant Vincent had an additional vulnerability. A child meant the emotional architecture of the Callaway leadership might fracture in directions Sophia could not control. Sophia had told Claire to stay hidden to protect the organization. She dressed it up as protection. She was good at that. Claire had not called Sophia back. She had not followed the advice. But she had also, until tonight, not told anyone about the visit. Not her sister, not her lawyer, certainly not Vincent. She had filed it in the back of her mind under things she would deal with eventually, and then done what she always did in the aftermath of Vincent Callaway. She had survived, day by day, building a life small enough to fit in a one-bedroom apartment in Boston with a baby and a part-time freelance editing job and more love than she had square footage to contain. The doctors need to know, she said, returning to solid ground. About your mother's side especially. She had something cardiac, I remember you mentioning. Arrhythmia. My grandfather, too. He was already on the phone, standing now, stepping toward the window. He spoke quietly, efficiently. A number dialed, 2 rings, a voice answering immediately because this was the kind of physician who maintained that arrangement with certain clients. Vincent gave the hospital name, the floor, the attending physician's name, which he'd gotten from the board in the corridor when he walked in, because of course he had. When he ended the call, he stood at the window for a moment with his back to Claire and his hand flat against the glass. She looks like you, he said. She has your eyelashes. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. Yeah, I see that. He turned around, and for the first time since he'd walked in, he looked directly at Claire. Not at the crib, not at the monitors, not past her. At her. With the specific quality of attention she had spent 14 months learning to live without. I need to know, he said quietly. All of it. Why you didn't tell me? I'm not... He stopped, started again. I'm not here to fight. I'm not making accusations. I just need to understand. Claire looked at her daughter asleep in the hospital crib, with the warming lamp casting a soft orange glow over her small face. She had rehearsed this conversation in 100 different versions over the past 8 months. In the shower, in the car, in the dark at 2 a.m. when Lillian was finally asleep, and the apartment was quiet enough that all the unfinished things came to find her. She'd had arguments where she won, and arguments where she was completely destroyed, and arguments where both of them ended up somewhere unexpected. She had never once rehearsed it in a hospital room at midnight with Lillian sick between them. "You told me," she said, "on 4 separate occasions during our marriage, that you never wanted children, that it would be cruel to bring a child into our life, that anyone close to you would become a target. You believed that. I know you believed it." He held her gaze, said nothing. "I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after I filed for divorce. The papers weren't even finalized." She kept her voice steady. "Clinical. If she stayed clinical, she could get through this. I sat with it for 2 months before I told anyone, and I thought about calling you every single day. But you didn't." "But I didn't," she exhaled. "Because you told me, clearly, repeatedly, and I thought, if I call him, I'm not giving him a daughter. I'm handing him a burden he already told me he didn't want, and I couldn't do that. Not to you, not to her." Vincent was very still. "And then Sophia came," Claire said. The quality of the room changed. She felt it before she saw it on his face, a slight tightening, a shift in the quality of his attention. "Sophia Reynolds," she said. "She came to my apartment. I was 6 months along." She watched his face. "She told me you knew, that you'd sent her." "I didn't," he said, flat, immediate. "I know that now," Claire said. "I didn't know it then." He sat back down in the chair beside the crib. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped in front of him, and he stared at the floor for a long moment. "What did she say?" he said. "She said that you were aware of the pregnancy, that you'd asked her to handle it quietly, that the safest thing for the child, and for me, was to stay hidden, that if Vincent Calloway's enemies ever found out he had a daughter, neither of us would be safe." Claire paused. She made it sound like protection. She was very calm about it, very reasonable. "She always is," Vincent said. She brought an envelope. There was a document inside, but a financial arrangement. Monthly payments, substantial ones, for as long as I remained. Her word was discreet. "I didn't take it." He looked up at her. "I didn't take it," Claire said again. "I wasn't going to take money to erase my daughter, but I also—" She stopped. This was the part she hadn't rehearsed, the part she was only now understanding herself. "I also didn't tell you about the visit. I thought, even if she was lying about you knowing, the core argument wasn't wrong. You didn't want children. I'd already decided not to tell you. She hadn't changed my decision. She'd just confirmed what I already thought I knew." Lillian made a small sound in her sleep. Both of them turned immediately. The monitors didn't change. Just a dream sound, whatever infants dream about. Warmth, maybe. Motion. The feeling of being held. Lillian settled. They both exhaled at the same time. Vincent looked at his daughter for a long moment, and Claire looked at him looking at her, and she felt something shift in the room that she couldn't name and wasn't ready to name. "I need to make some calls," he said finally. Not to her. More to the space between them. "Vincent, not tonight." He stood up again. "Tonight I'm not going anywhere. I'll make the calls from here. But in the morning, Sophia Reynolds is going to have a very short window to explain herself before I remove her from every position she holds in my organization." He said it quietly. That was the thing about Vincent at his most dangerous. He got quieter, not louder. She had learned that early. "That's not why I told you," Claire said. "I know. I don't want her punished on my behalf. I want Claire." His voice was patient, tired, more tired than she'd ever heard him. "She lied to you about me. She offered you money to hide my child. Whatever her reasons were, she made a decision that cost me 8 months of—" He stopped. His jaw tightened. "I'll handle it. That's separate from you. That's mine to handle." The room was quiet again. She could tell him to leave. She had that option. He would go, probably, if she asked him to, or at least step outside, because for all the things Vincent Calloway was and had been, he had never in their entire history ignored a direct request from her. It was one of the paradoxes of him, that a man who ruled through force and consequence respected the word no when it came from her, always had. She didn't ask him to leave. She reached into her bag and found the extra granola bar she'd packed at some point. She couldn't remember when. The afternoon felt like a different geological era, and she held it out to him. He looked at it, then at her. "You haven't eaten," she said. He took it. He sat back down beside the crib. And that was how they spent the rest of that night. Claire in the chair against the wall, Vincent in the chair beside the crib, Lillian between them on the monitors, all three of them suspended in the particular stillness of a hospital room at 2 in the morning while Boston sat frozen outside the window and snow began, very quietly, to fall. The snow had been falling for 2 hours before either of them acknowledged it. Claire noticed it first, the way the window behind Vincent had gone from black to gray to a soft, suffocating white, the kind of Boston snowfall that didn't announce itself dramatically, but simply accumulated until the world outside looked like it had always been that way. She noticed it and said nothing, because saying something would have broken whatever fragile ceasefire they'd established across the width of a hospital room, and she wasn't ready to break it. Vincent noticed it maybe 20 minutes later. She could tell by the way his eyes shifted to the glass briefly and then came back to Lillian without comment. He had not moved from the chair beside the crib in over 3 hours. He'd made 2 calls, both brief, both conducted in a voice too low to parse, stepping just to the doorway and back. Other than that, he'd been exactly where he'd placed himself when he sat down. Elbows on knees, posture controlled but not rigid, watching his daughter sleep with the focused attention of a man trying to memorize something he was afraid of losing. At 3:47 a.m., Lillian woke up. Not screaming, not crying hard. She surfaced from sleep the way she sometimes did. A small escalating sound, a fussing that built in stages, her arms moving against the blanket with the frustrated energy of someone who had woken up somewhere unfamiliar and needed to register an immediate complaint about it. Claire was on her feet before Lillian's second sound. She was at the crib rail, reaching in, before she'd consciously decided to stand. That was 8 months of conditioning. Her body responded to Lillian's sounds the way it responded to her own heartbeat, automatically, without consultation. She had Lillian half lifted when she felt Vincent beside her. She hadn't heard him move. He was simply there, at her shoulder, his hand coming up toward the crib rail, and then stopping when he saw that she already had her. Stopping and pulling back and just standing there, one hand slightly extended, suspended in the gap between wanting to help and not knowing if he had the right to. Claire settled Lillian against her chest. Lillian's fussing dropped in volume immediately, finding its familiar anchor. "She needs to eat," Claire said. She wasn't looking at Vincent. "Can you—" She nodded toward her bag on the chair against the wall. "There's a bottle in the side pocket, the insulated one." He got it without speaking. He brought it back and held it out, and their hands were close for a moment as she took it, and neither of them said anything about that. She sat in the rocking chair the hospital had positioned near the warming lamp and began feeding Lillian. Vincent stood for a moment in the middle of the room, looking like a man who had arrived in a country without learning the language, and then he pulled his chair around so he was no longer beside the empty crib, but closer. Not crowding, just reorienting, watching. "She does that thing with her hands," he said quietly. Claire looked down. Lillian was holding the bottle with both hands, fingers spread, gripping it with the particular intensity of an infant who has made a decision. "She's been doing that since month 4, Claire said. "Bossy," he said. "She comes by it honestly." She hadn't meant it as a dig. It came out too quickly to be strategic, just an unguarded true thing, and she felt him receive it, a slight exhale, something that wasn't quite a laugh but was in that neighborhood. "Yeah," he said. "Probably." They sat in that quiet for a few minutes. Lillian ate with focused efficiency. The monitors ticked. Outside, the snow kept coming down. "Tell me about her," Vincent said. "I want to—" He stopped, tried again. 8 months, tell me what I missed." Claire looked at him over Lillian's head. He was looking at Lillian, not at her. His expression was the most undefended she had ever seen it. She told him. Not everything. Not the nights when Lillian had cried for 2 hours straight and Claire had sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the tub because the tiles were cold and grounding and she'd needed grounding badly. Not the afternoon in month 3 when Lillian had gotten a small rash that turned out to be nothing, but Claire had called the pediatrician twice and sat rigid in the waiting room for 40 minutes, convinced she was failing at the most fundamental level. She didn't tell him those. She told him the first smile. The way Lillian had laughed, actually laughed, at the sound of a crinkly paper bag at month 5. This deep, surprised belly laugh from a creature who had no business producing that much joy per pound. She told him about the reaching, and the sitting up, and the specific imperious noise Lillian made when something was happening in another room that she hadn't approved. Vincent listened the way he sometimes had in their marriage, before things got complicated, with his full attention, not planning his response, just taking it in. At some point, Lillian finished the bottle and went loose against Claire's shoulder, gone back to sleep with the boneless immediacy of an infant whose needs had been addressed. Claire sat very still so she wouldn't disturb her, her chin resting lightly on top of Lillian's head. She was early, Claire said. 3 weeks. I was alone in the apartment when it started. I'd made arrangements. My friend Dana was supposed to be my person. She lives 10 minutes away. She didn't pick up. She paused. I drove myself to the hospital. She felt Vincent go still across from her. I was fine, she said. She was fine. It was fast, actually, 3 hours total, but I was... She stopped. This was not a story she'd told anyone except Dana, and Dana had heard it through a fog of guilt and apology. I was alone in the car in the hospital parking garage for about 15 minutes because I couldn't quite make myself go inside. Because going inside made it real. Because once I went inside, I was going to become a mother, and I had become so many things in the past year, and I was so tired, and I sat in that car, and I had this thought. She stopped. What? Vincent said, quiet. I thought, I wish I'd told him, not to fix it, not because I thought you'd be there, just... I wished someone who already knew me existed in the world was aware that something enormous was happening to me. The room was very quiet. Claire, he started, I'm not telling you that to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because you asked what you missed. That's what you missed, not just the milestones. She shifted Lillian slightly. The parking garage. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes briefly, a gesture so unlike his usual self-containment that it startled her. I have to ask you something, he said. She waited. Sophia came to your apartment. You said she brought an envelope, money, terms, all of it. He lowered his hands. His eyes were red at the edges, whether from tiredness or something else she wasn't able to determine. She made you believe I sent her. Yes. And you didn't believe her. I believed her at first, Claire said honestly, for about a week, and then She exhaled. I know how you operate, Vincent. You don't use lawyers to do things you want done quietly. If you'd wanted to send a message, it wouldn't have come in an envelope. Something moved through his face. He nodded once, slowly. I didn't send her, he said. I want to be absolutely clear about that. I know. I didn't know about the pregnancy. I didn't know about Lillian. Until tonight, I did not know she existed. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. A particular quality of control that she recognized as the thing he deployed when he was containing something that wanted very much to not be contained. Sophia acted alone. And whatever she told herself her reasons were, I need you to understand that what she did was, it was not sanctioned. It was not authorized. It was not something I would ever... He stopped. Vincent, Claire said carefully, what are you going to do? He looked at her. To her, Claire said. What are you going to do to Sophia? His jaw tightened. Remove her from her position. That's all? What are you asking me? I'm asking what remove her from her position means in your world. He was quiet for a moment. It means she loses her job, her access, her standing. He held Claire's gaze. I'm not going to hurt her, if that's what you're asking. I don't know what I'm asking, Claire said honestly. I don't want her harmed because of me. I made my own choices. She influenced them, but they were mine. She interfered with my family, Vincent said. The word came out of him differently than she expected it. Not like a power claim, not like territory. Like something he was still arriving at. That's not something I can let go of. But I understand the line you're drawing. I'm not going to cross it. She believed him. She wasn't sure if she should believe him. That was the central calculus of Vincent Calloway. He was a man who kept his word, which made it worse, not better, because it meant when he said something quiet in that particular voice, it was true. But the thing it was true about sometimes lived on the wrong side of a line that polite people didn't discuss. Lillian stirred against her shoulder, and Claire adjusted her grip, and the moment moved on. She didn't sleep. She meant to. There was a second chair, and she thought about asking Vincent to take Lillian while she closed her eyes for 20 minutes. But every time she considered it, the logistics felt too complicated, too loaded with meaning, and she let the impulse go and sat with her daughter and watched the snow outside the window. At some point between 4 and 5 a.m., Vincent fell asleep in his chair. She noticed it happen. A gradual stillness, his breathing evening out, his head dropping forward slightly, and then catching, and then dropping again, and then going still. He was asleep with his coat still on and his phone in his hand, sitting in a hospital chair that wasn't built for someone his size, and he looked, for the first time in her memory, like a man who was just a man. She looked at him for a long time. She looked at Lillian. She looked at the window. She did not let herself feel whatever it was that was pushing at the edges of her sternum, because there were at least 15 reasons this moment was dangerous, and she was too tired to itemize them all, but she knew they existed. At 6:15 a.m., the doctor came in. The noise woke Vincent immediately. He surfaced fast, the way people do when they've trained themselves to wake that way, and he was upright and alert before the door had fully opened, which was its own kind of information about the life he lived. The doctor was the same one from the night before, now 12 hours into what must have been an extended shift, carrying the particular worn competence of someone past exhaustion into the territory beyond it, where the body just keeps going. She looked at Vincent with the brief professional assessment of someone who'd been told by the night nurse that the patient's father was present and had registered no further opinion about it. The viral panel came back, the doctor said. She was looking at Claire. It's RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, common in infants, especially in winter. The fever elevation we saw last night was acute. Her temperature has been stable for the last 2 hours, and the secondary blood work looks clean. No bacterial component, no cardiac involvement. A brief pause. The medical history your husband's physician transmitted last night was helpful. No concerns on the hereditary front. Claire didn't correct the word husband. She didn't have the energy, and the doctor had already moved on. She'll need monitoring for another 24 hours minimum, the doctor continued, but based on her overnight stability, I'm cautiously optimistic about discharge by tomorrow afternoon if the trend holds. What does she need? Vincent said. Not aggressively, just directly. The doctor turned to him. Rest, fluids, temperature management. We'll keep her on the monitors. RSV in healthy infants resolves on its own. The job is making sure her breathing stays clear and her fever stays managed. Anything we can do, he said. Be here, the doctor said simply, and left. The room settled. Claire let out a breath that felt like it had been in her chest for 8 hours. It's RSV, she said quietly, more to herself. She's going to be fine. Vincent said it with a certainty she found annoying and also, right now, necessary. You don't know that. No, but I'm deciding it. He stood up, rolling his neck once. She heard the crack from across the room. I'll get coffee. There's a place down the street that opens at 6. Do you still? Black, she said. 2 sugars. He nodded once. He reached for his coat, which he'd been sleeping in, and he was already at the door when he stopped and turned back around. Claire. She looked up. After this is over, he said. After she's home and she's fine. I want to talk about what happens next, about how I'm present in her life. I'm not making demands. I'm not... He stopped. I just need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. She held his gaze for a long moment. Get the coffee, she said. He left. She sat with Lillian in the sudden quiet and put her hand flat on her daughter's small back and felt it rise and fall and rise and fall, and thought about the word present and what it meant from a man whose presence had always taken up more space than most people had. He was gone 11 minutes. She knew because she watched the clock. When he came back, he had coffee and he had someone with him. A man she didn't recognize, mid-40s, close-cropped gray hair, one of those faces that existed professionally in the background of other people's important moments. The man stayed in the doorway. Vincent handed Claire her coffee and then exchanged something with the man in a voice she couldn't hear, 2 sentences, and the man nodded and left. Who was that? Claire said. Marcus. He runs security. You have a security person here. I have a security person everywhere. Vincent, there are people who would like to use information about me against me, he said. He sat back down, wrapping both hands around his own coffee. Having a daughter makes that more complicated, not less. I'm not trying to turn a hospital into a fortress. Marcus is in the lobby. That's where he'll stay. You made that decision without asking me. He looked at her steadily. Yes. That's not... I know, he said. It's not okay. And I did it anyway, because I've been here for 7 hours and I've identified 3 variables in this building's access situation that I don't like. And I am physically incapable of ignoring that, and I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not at 6 in the morning after the night we've had. He paused. I'm sorry, genuinely, but Marcus is staying. Claire looked at him. At the set of his jaw, the exhaustion around his eyes that the control of his voice was working hard to mask. This was the thing. This was the specific structural thing she had left. Not the danger of his world, abstractly. Not even the real and present risk to a person who loved him. It was this. The decisions made before she was consulted, the protective measures deployed without discussion, the specific way he organized the world around the people he cared about that looked like love from one angle and looked like control from another. And she had spent 4 married years unable to determine which angle was true. She looked at Lillian. She thought about the parking garage. After this is over, she said very quietly, we're going to set some rules. Real ones. Not suggestions. Rules. Okay, he said. You don't get to agree with me that easily. I'm not agreeing with you, he said. I'm agreeing that you have the right to say it. She didn't know what to do with that distinction, so she drank her coffee and let it sit. At 7 a.m., Vincent's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and something in his face closed in a way she hadn't seen since the previous night, shuddered, immediately strategic. He stood up and stepped to the doorway. Don't, he said into the phone. One word, then, who told her? A pause. I don't care how she found out. She doesn't come here. Yes, I'm sure. Tell her I'll call this afternoon. He ended the call. He stood in the doorway for a moment with his back to Claire. Sophia, she said. Not a question. He turns around. She knows I'm here. How? She has sources. He came back into the room, sat down. His voice was controlled again, but she could see the effort it took now. The slight tension in his jaw, the particular stillness that meant he was processing something uncomfortable. She's asked to speak with me. What did you tell her? That she could wait. Vincent? Claire set down her coffee. What does it mean that she already knows? That she found out that fast? He looked at her for a long moment. It means, he said slowly, that someone in my immediate circle communicated my location within the last 6 hours, which means the person who went out of their way to ensure you stayed hidden is now going out of her way to find out what I know. The room was very quiet. She's not just protecting the organization, Claire said. No, Vincent said. She's protecting herself. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at Lillian, still sleeping, her chest rising and falling with the steady reliability of something that had been pushed hard and was now, slowly, recovering. What did she say to you, he said, when she came to your apartment? Not the official version. What did she actually say? Claire thought back. The kitchen. The dish towel. Sophia's eyes doing their quiet calibration. She said the baby would complicate things, Claire said. She said you were in a difficult position with the Marchetti family at the time, and that a child, her word was liability. She said a child was a liability you couldn't afford. He went completely still. The Marchetti negotiation, he said. She knew about that. She's your legal advisor. Of course That negotiation was internal. 3 people knew the full scope of it. His voice was different now, flatter. The way a road gets flat before something drops away from it. Me, my brother Daniel, and Sophia. Claire felt something in her chest that wasn't fear but was adjacent to it. What are you saying? She said. He looked at her directly. I'm saying that Sophia didn't come to you to protect Lillian from my enemies. He said it quietly, with the precision of someone who has assembled a thing they don't like looking at but are going to look at anyway. I'm saying she came because she needed you invisible, not for the organization, for herself. Because if you were invisible, Lillian was invisible. And I never found out what she knew about the Marchetti situation and what she might have done with that knowledge. Claire sat very still. She used me, she said. She used both of us. Outside the window, the snow had stopped. Boston was white and still, and the first gray light of a winter morning was beginning to spread itself across the buildings, colorless and honest, the way January mornings were honest in this city. They didn't pretend it wasn't cold. Claire looked at her daughter sleeping in the hospital crib. 8 months. Sophia Reynolds had known where she lived and what she was doing and had let her believe Peter had carefully constructed the belief that Vincent knew and had decided not to care. That the man she'd spent 4 years married to had learned about his child and had quietly, efficiently, dispatched someone to handle it. She had believed it for about a week, she'd told him. That was true. But the residue of it, the faint, ugly possibility of it, had never quite left, and Sophia had known it wouldn't. "Vincent," she said. "Yeah. I need you to do something for me." He looked at her. "Whatever you're planning with Sophia," she said, "before you do it, I need to talk to her first." He was very still. "Claire, I'm not asking your permission," she said. "I'm telling you, before anything else happens, I want to sit across from that woman and hear her say to my face why she thought she had the right to make decisions about my daughter's life." She held his gaze. "Can you give me that?" He studied her for a long moment. The monitors beeped. Lillian's chest rose and fell. "Yes," he said finally. "Thank you." He said, "I need you to understand what I found out this morning, from Marcus. The reason Sophia knows I'm here isn't just sources." He reached into his coat pocket and set his phone on the crib rail, face up, a message visible on the screen. Claire leaned forward and read it. It was from a number she didn't recognize, sent at 5:43 a.m. 11 words. "She has the file, Vincent. Sophia has the Marchetti file. She's been holding it." Claire looked up at him. "Someone in her network warned me," he said quietly, "because Sophia has documentation of something that should not exist in documentation form. And the only reason to hold something like that is leverage." He picked up the phone, put it back in his pocket. "Which means this stopped being about you and Lillian last night. And Sophia knows I know, and she's not waiting for me to call this afternoon." He stood up. "She's already moving," he said. Vincent moved first. He had his phone out before Claire had fully processed what she'd read, and he was already at the door when she said his name. Not loudly, not with the panic that was sitting in her throat, but with enough weight that he stopped. "Lillian," she said. He turned. He looked at the crib. He looked at Claire. "I'm not leaving the floor," he said. "Marcus is downstairs. I need 2 minutes in the corridor." 2 minutes, she said. He went out. She heard his voice through the closed door, low, clipped, the tone she'd come to think of as his operational register, the one that didn't negotiate and didn't explain itself. She couldn't make out words. She didn't try. She looked at Lillian. Lillian was still sleeping. Her temperature had been stable for 2 hours. She was going to be fine. The doctor had said cautiously optimistic, and Claire was choosing in this specific moment to hold on to cautiously and let optimistic do the structural work. She picked up her own phone. She had 3 texts from her sister Rachel, sent between midnight and 4 a.m., escalating in concern. She had a missed call from Dana. She had a notification from the hospital's patient portal confirming Lillian's latest vitals. She did not have anything from Sophia Reynolds, which was notable, because Sophia had Claire's number and had used it exactly once, a text message the week after the apartment visit that said simply, "I hope you're well. The offer stands." Claire had not responded. She had saved the message. She pulled it up now. Read it again. "I hope you're well. The offer stands." 8 months ago, she had read that as a follow-up, a professional courtesy wrapped around a threat. Now she read it differently, as a data point, a confirmation of contact, a record Sophia had created, perhaps intentionally, of Claire's silence, of Claire's ongoing compliance. Sophia was very careful. Claire had underestimated how careful. Vincent came back in exactly 2 minutes. "She's at the hospital," he said. Claire's head came up. "She's here?" "Lobby, 2nd floor waiting area. She came in 40 minutes ago." He was completely still in the way that meant he was not at all still internally. "Marcus picked her up on entry. She hasn't tried to come up. She's just sitting there." "She's waiting for you to know she's here," Claire said. Yes? She wants a meeting. She wants control of the meeting. He crossed to his chair and picked up his coat, which he hadn't been wearing. He'd shed it in the last hour, jacket too, rolled his sleeves to the forearm the way he did when he was moving between conversations, and needed to feel less formal. He didn't put the coat back on. He held it. She knows I know about the file. Whoever warned me, she's figured out it happened, so she's here to get ahead of it. Then don't let her. He looked at her. You asked her to wait until this afternoon, Claire said. She came anyway. That's not a coincidence. That's a statement. She's telling you that she doesn't have to wait for your timeline. She was thinking clearly, which surprised her given that she'd been awake for approximately 22 hours. Adrenaline had a way of doing that, burning through exhaustion and leaving something sharper and less pleasant behind. If you go down there now, on her schedule, you're already behind. He studied her for a moment. What would you do? I'd make her come up here, Claire said. On my terms. In this room. She looked at Lillian. Let her sit with what she did. Something moved through his face that might have been respect and might have been something older than that. He made one call. 40 seconds. When he hung up, he set the phone on the windowsill. She'll be here in 5 minutes, he said. Those 5 minutes were the strangest of the night. Vincent stood at the window. Claire sat with Lillian, who had begun to surface from sleep again, making the small pre-waking sounds that meant she was coming back to herself. Claire lifted her from the crib before the fussing could build, settled her against her shoulder, felt the small warm weight of her orient and adjust and relax into the familiar position. She was standing when the door opened. Sophia Reynolds was 51, looked 45 through excellent maintenance and the particular discipline of a woman who understood that appearance was a professional instrument. She wore a gray wool coat, belted. Her hair was pulled back. She was carrying nothing. No bag, no folder, no props. She had walked into a hospital room at 7 in the morning without anything in her hands, and the effect was somehow more unnerving than if she'd arrived with documentation. She looked at Vincent first, a long, assessing look that Claire recognized as the legal version of taking inventory. Then she looked at Claire. Then she looked at Lillian. For the first time since Claire had known her, Sophia Reynolds looked like she had not fully anticipated something. It lasted half a second. Then it was gone. Vincent, she said. Sophia. His voice was the flat, cold version. The version Claire had heard him use exactly twice in their marriage. Once with a man who had stolen from him, and once with a contractor who had endangered someone in his household. Both conversations had ended with the other person understanding precisely and permanently the nature of their situation. Sit down. I'd rather stand. That wasn't a preference question. A beat. Sophia sat in the chair Claire had vacated against the wall. The furthest chair from the crib, the one with the direct sightline to Lillian. Claire noticed she didn't choose the chair beside the crib, the one Vincent had occupied all night. She chose the one with the view, still calibrating, still positioning. I know why you're upset, Sophia began. Do you? Vincent said. You found out about my visit to Claire. I understand how that looks. Tell me about the file, he said. Sophia stopped. The silence was 3 seconds long, and it was one of the loudest silences Claire had ever been inside. That's not, Sophia started. The Marchetti file, Vincent said. The documentation. Tell me what's in it and how long you've had it. Sophia looked at him with the specific expression of someone running rapid calculations that were not yielding good results. She looked, for the first time, like a woman in a room she hadn't meant to be trapped in. I was protecting the organization, she said. From what? From you. She said it cleanly, directly. Claire had to give her credit. When the position became untenable, she didn't collapse into it. She pivoted. From the decision you were going to make, Vincent, the Marchetti negotiation was going to cost us everything. You were going to walk away from an agreement worth $40 million in protected operations over the next 3 years because you'd decided it conflicted with some private moral line you'd drawn. Her voice was measured, professional. She could have been presenting a legal brief. I documented it to protect the organization against the legal exposure of that decision. If it ever came apart, we needed... You documented an internal criminal negotiation, Vincent said, in writing, with my name on it. With appropriate legal framing, Sophia. His voice dropped. Not louder. Lower. I know what you have. I know what it says. I know it doesn't have appropriate legal framing because there is no appropriate legal framing for what that document describes. He stepped away from the window. One step. What I don't know yet is who else has seen it. Sophia's jaw tightened. Who else? He said. No one. Try again. Vincent, I want you to understand that everything I've done has been in service of. You went to my ex-wife when she was 6 months pregnant, he said. You told her I knew about the baby and had decided not to care. You offered her money to disappear. You kept my daughter from me for 8 months. I was standing very still now, 2 feet from Sophia's chair, and his voice was the same temperature it had been all morning, controlled, quiet, precise. But the quality of the quiet had changed. And you did all of it because you needed Claire invisible so that I never started asking questions about what happened during the Marchetti negotiation. Is that accurate? Sophia looked at him. Something in her face had shifted. The professional calibration was still there, but it was working harder now, and underneath it, Claire could see something that wasn't quite fear but was in the same family. I made decisions that I believed were necessary, Sophia said. Who else has the file? The question landed again. Sophia's eyes moved, briefly, involuntarily, to the window. It was a small tell. Claire caught it. Vincent caught it. There's a copy, Claire said. She hadn't meant to speak. It came out of the particular clarity of exhaustion, the way things do when your filter is down and the obvious thing simply surfaces. She made a copy. It's not with her. Sophia looked at Claire. Really looked at her, for the first time since she'd walked in. It wasn't the look from the kitchen 8 months ago. That cool, managing assessment. This was something more direct, something almost like acknowledgement. Smart, Sophia said quietly. Where is it? Vincent said. Somewhere you can't get to it by making a phone call, Sophia said. She had recovered her composure, settled back into it like armor, and the effect was impressive even now, even here. Vincent, I don't want this to become adversarial. I came here because I want to resolve this, quietly. The same way I've been handling things quietly for you for 9 years. You handled my family, he said. I protected the organization. Stop saying that. His voice cracked through the room. Not loud, but sharp. The first break in the controlled register, and Claire felt Lillian stir against her shoulder, and she pressed her hand to the baby's back and held still. Stop putting the organization between us like it's a reason. You made a decision about my child. You looked my wife in the face, and you lied to her, and you offered her money to make my daughter disappear. I don't care what the Marchetti file says. I don't care about the exposure. Nothing in that file is worth what you did in that apartment, and you know it, which is why you came here at 7 in the morning instead of waiting for me to come to you. Sophia was quiet. You're scared, he said, not of what I'll do about the file. You're scared because you looked at that crib when you walked in here and you understood, finally, what you actually took from me. Something crossed Sophia's face that Claire had no name for. Not regret. It wasn't soft enough for regret. But something in that register, something that acknowledged a cost. The copy is with my attorney, Sophia said, with instructions. If I don't make contact within 72 hours, it goes to 3 separate federal offices. The temperature of the room dropped. Claire felt it physically, a change in the quality of the air, the way pressure changes before weather. You built a dead man's switch, Vincent said. I built protection, Sophia said, for myself. Because I know how you handle problems, Vincent. I've been watching you handle them for 9 years, and you needed leverage, he said, against me. I needed insurance. Same thing. Sophia stood up. She was taller than Claire remembered, or maybe it was the room. I am not your enemy. I have never been your enemy. Everything in that file is structured to protect you if it ever surfaces. It's documentation of legal counsel, framed correctly. It names names, Vincent said. It names dates. It names amounts. You know exactly what it does, Sophia. You wrote it. She held his gaze. What do you want? He said. I want to continue my role, she said. I want us to go back to the way things were before last night, because last night doesn't have to change anything about how we operate. My daughter exists, he said flatly. Last night changed everything. Your daughter doesn't have to be part of the organization's structure. She's already part of it. He said it with a finality that was almost quiet enough to miss. The moment you went to Claire's apartment, Lillian became part of it. You made sure of that. You made it so that I can't protect her without understanding everything you've done. So no, we're not going back to the way things were." Sophia looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Claire. Then, and this was the thing Claire would think about later, not the document, not the leverage, not the dead man's switch, but this specific moment. Sophia looked at Lillian, at the small sleeping weight against Claire's shoulder, and her expression did something that Claire couldn't categorize. Not warmth, not guilt. Something more complicated. Something that looked, uncomfortably, like grief. "I did what I thought was necessary," Sophia said. And for the first time all morning, her voice had lost its professional register. It was just a voice, a tired one. "I have kept that organization alive through 3 federal investigations and 2 rival incursions and a dozen situations that should have destroyed it. I have spent 9 years making sure that you had an empire to come home to. And when I looked at the variables, she was a baby," Claire said. Sophia looked at her. "She wasn't a variable," Claire said. Her voice was very quiet, very steady. "She was a baby. She was 8 weeks old when you came to my apartment. She was the size of a grocery bag. And you looked at her and you saw a liability. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I want to understand something, not for him, for me. Did you actually believe I would take that money?" Sophia was silent. "Did you think I was the kind of person who would take money to make my own child disappear?" "I thought," Sophia said carefully, "that you were a woman in a very difficult position who had recently left a marriage that had cost her a great deal, and that a significant financial arrangement might provide—" "You thought I was desperate enough," Claire said. "You thought if you made it look like it came from Vincent, I'd believe I had no other option." A pause. "Yes." The word landed in the room and sat there. "Okay," Claire said. "Just that." She turned away from Sophia. She adjusted Lillian against her shoulder. She looked at the window, at the white Boston morning that was now fully present and indifferent. Behind her, she heard Vincent say, quietly, "Get out of this room." "Vincent, the file, get out of this room," he said again, the same volume, the same tone. "Marcus will walk you to the lobby. You'll hear from my attorney by end of day. You will not contact Claire. You will not contact anyone in this hospital. You will make contact with your attorney today, and you will begin the process of dismantling that arrangement, because I am telling you now, clearly, that if you use that file as leverage against me or anyone connected to me, I will spend every resource I have making sure that the only story anyone remembers about Sophia Reynolds is the one where she went to a pregnant woman's apartment and offered her cash to vanish." He paused. "That story doesn't need a file, it just needs a conversation. And I have the other party available." Sophia looked at Claire, then at Vincent, then at Lillian, one more time. She walked out without another word. The door closed. Claire stood with her back to the room for a long moment, her hand on Lillian's back, feeling the small, steady rhythm of her breathing. "Claire," Vincent said, "I'm fine." "You don't have to be fine." "I know." She turned around. He was standing near the crib, the coat still in his hand, looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him in a very long time. Not careful, not strategic, not even kind in the managed way he could be kind. Just open. Just there. "She was right about one thing," Claire said. He waited. "I was desperate," Claire said. "When she came. I was 6 months pregnant, and I was doing it alone, and I was terrified, and I was—" She stopped, started again. "I didn't take the money because I'm not that person, but I won't pretend it wasn't a harder decision than it should have been. I want you to know that. Because if you're going to be in Lillian's life, you need to know what the actual last year looked like. Not the version where I was noble and certain, the real one." He looked at her steadily. "She was 2 pounds bigger than the app said she'd be," Claire said. "When she was born, 2 pounds bigger and screaming before she was all the way out. The nurses laughed. They said she had opinions. And I was alone in that room, and I had this 2-pound heavier, opinion-having baby. And all I could think was that she was going to be like you, and I was terrified of that. And I also—" Her voice broke, cleanly, once, like something small snapping. She pulled it back. "I also thought it was the best thing I'd ever heard in my life." The room was quiet. Lillian, against her shoulder, made a small sound of comfort-seeking and turned her face into Claire's neck. "I want to meet her," Vincent said. His voice was rough at the edges. "Properly, when she's awake, When she's... He stopped. I want her to know I'm here. She's 8 months old, Claire said. She doesn't know what here means yet. Then I'll be here long enough that she learns it. Claire looked at him for a long moment. She believed him. That was this problem, the same problem it had always been. She believed him when he said things like that, because the specific texture of his voice when he meant something was different from his voice when he was managing a situation, and she had never in 12 years been wrong about which was which. She believed him, and she also knew, with the clarity of 22 sleepless hours, that Sophia Reynolds was in the lobby of this hospital with a file that could dismantle everything Vincent had built, and that the dead man's switch she'd described meant that even if Vincent moved against her, the information went to federal offices, and that the woman Claire had just watched walk out of this room was not someone who surrendered leverage. She was someone who had spent 9 years building it. The morning was fully here now. Boston was white outside the window. The monitors reported Lillian's vitals in small green numbers. Down the corridor, the hospital was beginning its daytime transition. More voices, more footsteps, the institutional rhythm of a building returning to full capacity. Claire's phone buzzed on the chair. She picked it up. The number was one she didn't recognize. The message was 4 words. She told them already. Claire stared at the screen. Vincent's phone went off a half-second later. She watched him look at it. She watched the color leave his face. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the particular way that color leaves the face of a man who has spent his life believing he controlled the timing of disasters and has just discovered he was wrong. "Vincent," she said. He looked up. "What does it mean?" she said. She told them already. What does that mean? Who did she tell? He didn't answer immediately. He looked at his phone, then at Lillian, then at Claire, and the expression on his face was the one she'd never seen before last night, the open, undefended one. But now there was something else underneath it, something that had no professional register to hide behind. "It means," he said quietly, "that the file wasn't leverage." He set his phone down on the windowsill. "It was already gone," he said. "She came here this morning not to negotiate. She came to deliver a message. Everything she said in this room, the 72 hours, the attorney, the dead man's switch, that was her telling me what had already happened." Claire held Lillian tighter than she meant to. The baby squirmed slightly and resettled. "How bad?" Claire said. He looked at her with an expression that was, for the first time in their entire history, entirely without strategy. "I need to make some calls," he said, "and I need you to listen to me very carefully about what comes next, because what I'm about to say is the most important thing I've said to you in the 12 years I've known you." He picked up his phone. His hand, she noticed, was not entirely steady. He made 3 calls in 6 minutes. Claire sat in the chair beside Lillian's crib and listened to the shape of them without hearing the content. Vincent at the window, his back to the room, his voice low and clipped, each call shorter than the last. The first call lasted 2 minutes and ended with him saying a name she didn't recognize twice. The second lasted 90 seconds. The third was 40 seconds and ended with nothing, just him pulling the phone from his ear and standing with it at his side, and his forehead almost touching the cold glass of the window. "Talk to me," Claire said. He turned around. He looked, for the first time since she'd known him, like someone who had taken a hit and was still deciding whether to show it. "Sophia didn't send the file to federal offices," he said. He came away from the window and sat in the chair he'd occupied all night, elbows on knees, phone held loosely in both hands. "She sent it to Richard Marchetti." The name landed in Claire's chest like something dropped from a height. She knew that name, not from the organization's business. Vincent had kept that separated with religious discipline during their marriage, a firewall she had mostly respected and occasionally resented. She knew it because 3 years ago at a charity function she'd attended alone while Vincent was in New York, a man had introduced himself as Richard Marchetti and had been extremely pleasant and had kissed her hand with the specific old-world courtesy that functions as its own kind of threat. And she had come home and told Vincent and watched his face do something she'd never seen before, and he'd said simply, "Don't interact with him again," and she hadn't asked why. She understood why now. "He's going to move," Vincent said. Not to her. More organizing his thoughts out loud, which he'd never done in their marriage. Another sign. He's been waiting for something like this. The Marchetti negotiation. When I walked away from it, it cost him. Not just money, standing. He told people the deal was done. I walked away. It made him look like he couldn't close. He's been holding that for 2 years. And now Sophia handed him documentation, Claire said. Documentation of our internal discussions about why I walked away. Including... He stopped, his jaw tightened. Including some things that, framed correctly, would look like I was negotiating in bad faith from the beginning, like I was using the negotiation to gather information about his operations. Were you? He looked at her directly. Yes. The word sat between them. Okay, she said, not surprised, not wounded, just taking it in. It was strategic. The negotiation was always... He stopped himself. You don't need the details. I need enough to understand what we're dealing with. He looked at her for a moment. If Marchetti goes public with what Sophia gave him, it doesn't just end the organization. It ends it in a way that leaves everyone associated with it exposed. My brother. The people who work for me. Lawyers, accountants, people who made legitimate choices about where to build their careers. He exhaled through his nose. And it gives Marchetti a clean hand to walk into everything we've built and take it. Because if I'm dismantled by the exposure, there's a vacuum. And he fills it, Claire said. He fills it. Lillian made a sound. Both of them looked. She was awake, fully awake, for the first time since they'd arrived, her eyes open and tracking, her head moving slowly on the small hospital pillow. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at the light above her crib. She looked at Vincent, who was the closest face, and she stopped. She stared at him with the full focused intensity of an 8-month-old who has found something interesting. Vincent didn't move. Lillian's arm came up. The reaching gesture, the one Claire had described the night before, fingers spread, aimed at whatever had captured her attention. She was reaching for his face. He looked at her for one long, unguarded moment, and then he reached into the crib and let her grab his finger, and she did, with the specific grip strength that still surprised Claire every time, and he let her hold it. I need to leave the hospital, he said quietly, not taking his eyes off Lillian. Marcus can stay. I need to be somewhere I can make the next set of calls without... He glanced at Claire. Without this room becoming something it shouldn't be. Are you in danger right now? Claire said. Physically. Not in the next few hours. Marchetti moves through lawyers first. He's been waiting 2 years. He's not going to be impulsive about it. He'll use the document to apply pressure before he does anything else. He wants leverage more than he wants blood. A pause. Probably. Probably, Claire repeated. I'm not going to lie to you about the variables. I appreciate that, she said, and she meant it, and it was also the most absurd thing she'd said in a year. Lillian was still holding his finger. She had lost interest in his face and was now attempting to get the finger into her mouth, which he was gently preventing, and his expression during this small mechanical negotiation was something that made Claire look away for a moment because it was too much to look at directly. Go, she said. Claire, go do what you have to do. Come back. She said it before she had decided to say it. She'll be awake. She'll be awake when you come back. He looked at her. He didn't say anything for a moment. 3 hours, he said. I'll be back in 3 hours. He carefully extracted his finger from Lillian's grip. Lillian registered the loss with immediate displeasure, a sharp, indignant sound that escalated toward a cry, and Vincent looked stricken in a way that was entirely unrelated to anything happening outside this room. She's okay, Claire said. She reached into the crib and took Lillian's hand herself. She's fine. Go. He went. The room without him was different. It had a different acoustic quality. The monitor's the same, the corridor sounds the same, but the particular charged atmosphere that Vincent Calloway generated wherever he was dissipated quickly, leaving the room feeling both smaller and easier to breathe in, which was the paradox she'd spent years living inside. She fed Lillian again, changed her. The nurse came in at 8:15 to take a temperature reading, down to 101, trending correctly, and Claire answered questions and signed something and was alone again. She texted Rachel, everything is okay, she has RSV, fever coming down, we'll call later. She texted Dana, I'm sorry I didn't call last night, it was complicated. She sat with Lillian in the rocking chair and didn't let herself think about the Marchetti file and what it meant, or what Vincent was doing, or what Sophia had set in motion from the lobby of this hospital at 7 in the morning while Claire was standing 10 feet away holding her daughter. She let herself think about Lillian instead, the weight of her. The specific smell of her head, which was something Claire had never been able to describe to anyone. Not baby powder, not hospital soap, just Lillian, some essential Lillian-specific chemistry that her nervous system had apparently encoded in the first minutes after birth and had been navigating by ever since. She thought about the parking garage. She thought, she has his eyelashes and my stubbornness, and she is the only thing in this situation that is not complicated. She thought, I am so tired. At 9:43 a.m., Marcus appeared in the doorway. He was a compact man with the particular stillness of someone trained to read rooms quickly, and he read this one in about 2 seconds and then addressed Claire with the specific professional courtesy of someone who understood they were an intrusion. Mrs. Calloway, he said. Whitmore, she said. What's wrong? Mr. Calloway asked me to bring you something. He held out a phone, not her phone, which was in her pocket, but another one. Newer. Still in a partial unboxing state, screen protector not fully applied. He said to use this for any calls in the next several hours. Your current number may have been accessed. Claire stared at the phone. By whom? She said. He didn't specify. He said he'd explain when he returns. Marcus paused. He also said to tell you that Daniel is on his way. His brother. Mr. Calloway wanted family present while he's away from the floor. I don't need a babysitter, Claire said. No, Marcus agreed. But Mr. Calloway does. Daniel's presence here gives him information about the room's status without requiring him to call. He paused again. The careful pause of someone who'd said more than they usually said and was calibrating whether to stop there. It also means that if anyone wants to reach Mr. Calloway through his vulnerabilities, they'll find this room staffed by someone who is not, with respect, a single person holding an infant. The word vulnerabilities settled over her like a temperature change. Is that what we are? She said. Vulnerabilities. Marcus looked at her steadily. To him, no. In the current situation structure, tactically, yes. He's aware of the difference. She took the phone. Daniel Calloway arrived at 10:15. He was 3 years younger than Vincent, a half-inch shorter, with a lighter quality to everything about him. The way he held himself, the way he walked into the room and immediately looked at Lillian with an expression of unguarded delight rather than his brother's unguarded shock. Oh, Daniel said. Just that. Standing at the crib rail, looking down at Lillian, who looked back up at him with the same focused interest she'd shown Vincent. Oh, she's... Vincent didn't say she was... He looked at Claire. She's beautiful. She looks like both of you. She has his eyelashes, Claire said. She has his ears, Daniel said. He pulled up a chair. Not the chair against the wall, but the one beside the crib, the one his brother had occupied for 6 hours. He sat in it without hesitation. Hi, Lillian. I'm your Uncle Daniel. I'm the fun one. The other one has management issues. We'll talk. Lillian appeared to find Daniel broadly acceptable. She reached for his finger. Smart kid, he said, letting her take it. He looked at Claire. The lightness didn't leave his face, but something more serious moved underneath it. Vincent called me at 8 this morning, told me everything. Last night, Sophia, the Marchetti situation, all of it. He paused. He told me about the apartment, what she did when you were pregnant. Daniel, I'm not going to make a speech about it, he said. I just wanted you to know I know. And I'm sorry. For all of it. For the way things went. He looked back at Lillian. She's great, Claire. You did something great here. She pressed her mouth together for a moment and looked at the window. What's happening with Vincent? She said. He's at the office. The real one, not the... He tilted his head slightly. The legitimate one. His attorney's there, his accountant. They're building a response to whatever Marchetti moves with. Vincent's position is that the document in context doesn't say what Sophia framed it as saying. His attorney thinks he can... Daniel stopped. I'm probably not supposed to be telling you the tactical details. Tell me anyway. He looked at her, a small evaluative pause. Vincent's position is that the negotiation documentation shows legal counsel advising against a deal on liability grounds. Sophia wrote the surrounding framework herself. She's been his attorney for 9 years. She knows how to structure language. His attorney thinks that with Sophia's cooperation, the frame can be dismantled. And if Sophia doesn't cooperate, Claire said. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Vincent's working on that, he said. What does that mean? It means he's making calls. She understood. in the way she'd always understood the vocabulary of omission that surrounded everything Vincent did, that making calls covered a range of actions she was better off not categorizing precisely. "Is he going to be okay?" she said. Daniel looked at her. Something in his expression settled into honesty. "I don't know. The exposure is real. Marchetti's attorney has already sent a letter. This morning, before 10 a.m. They work fast." He paused. "But Vincent's been in impossible positions before. He's good at—" Another pause. "He's good at finding the thing that changes the equation." At 11:30, Lillian's temperature was 100.4. The nurse said it with the matter-of-fact brightness of someone delivering genuinely good news, and Claire felt something in her chest unknot with a physical sensation, like a muscle that had been contracted for 18 hours releasing all at once, the relief almost painful. "Trending very well," the nurse said. "The doctor will do afternoon rounds at 2. If she stays on this trajectory, we may talk about discharge tomorrow morning." Daniel was grinning at Lillian. "Hear that? You get to go home, kid." Lillian, who had no opinion about hospitals, except that she found the ceiling lights interesting, grabbed a handful of Daniel's sleeve. Claire called Vincent on the new phone. He picked up on the first ring. "Her temperature's down to 100, she said. A silence. "Not long. Just a breath." "Good," he said. His voice was different than it had been this morning, more compressed, the way it got when he was working and the work was not going well. "Good. Are you all right?" "Working on it. That's not an answer. It's the one I have right now." She could hear something behind him. Another voice, brief, giving information. She heard Vincent say, not to her, "Tell him I'll call back in 10 minutes, and then the background voice moved away. "Marchetti's attorney contacted mine at 9:52, he said. "They're not going to federal offices with the document. They're using it privately, which is worse." "Why is it worse?" "Because it means they want something from me. Not my destruction. My cooperation." His voice was flat. "They want back to the table. The negotiation I walked away from 2 years ago, on their terms. And if you go back to the table, I hand them what they wanted 2 years ago, which is operational territory they've been trying to get into for a decade, and I do it from a position of documented bad faith, which means they own the terms, and I have no leverage, and the people who depend on my organization are at their discretion. And if you don't, the document goes somewhere that ends things." A pause. "Maybe not me specifically. The organization, certainly, and everyone in it." Claire sat with that for a moment. "There has to be a third option," she said. "I'm looking for it." "What does Sophia want?" Claire said. "In all of this, she's the one who moved the document. What does she actually want out of it?" A silence. Longer this time. "I don't know," he said. "Yes, you do," she said. "You've known her for 9 years. What does she want?" She heard him breathing. "She wants back in," he said slowly. "She wants her position. She's been running that organization's legal structure for nearly a decade, and I told her this morning that was over, and she—" He stopped. "She doesn't believe I'll actually end it. She thinks this is negotiable." "Is it?" "No." "Then she miscalculated," Claire said, "which means she's not as in control of this as she thinks she is. And people who've miscalculated are nervous, and nervous people make mistakes." She paused. "She's still in Boston?" "As far as I know." "I want to talk to her again." "Claire, not for you," she said. "I have something she doesn't know I have. The text she sent me 8 months ago, the one confirming contact, the one I never responded to." She held the phone tighter. "She created a record, Vincent, a written record of contact with me during the pregnancy. If she's trying to frame everything as having been done in the organization's interest, with your knowledge, that text is evidence she was operating independently. It shows she went around you." A long pause. "That's not nothing," he said. "No," she said. "It's not nothing. It's not everything, but it's something she left behind because she thought I was going to stay quiet." Another pause, shorter. "You said you wanted to talk to her again," he said. "In the hospital room this morning, I agreed to that. I still want it. She's not going to be easy to—" "I know who she is, Vincent." Her voice was steady. "I've been managing around her for 8 months without knowing I was doing it. Let me manage directly." A silence that had a different quality than the ones before it. "Daniel's with you," he said. "Yes." "Don't be alone with her. Daniel stays in the room." Okay. And Claire, his voice shifted, down, slightly, off the operational register. The 3 hours I said, I might need more time. The attorney wants, take what you need, she said. Come back when you can. She ended the call. Daniel was watching her from the chair beside Lillian's crib, his expression carefully neutral. You heard that, she said. Enough, he said. Can you get Sophia Reynolds back into this room? He looked at her for a moment. Probably. If she's still in the building, Marcus can ask her. If she's left, he paused. She hasn't left. She's in the second-floor cafe, has been since Vincent walked her out. Claire looked at him. She's been here this whole time. Waiting, he said. Like I said, she thinks it's negotiable. Claire stood up. She handed Lillian, now awake and engaged and gripping the edge of a hospital blanket with the focused determination of someone who has decided this blanket belongs to them. To Daniel, who received her with the instinctive competence of someone who'd been around babies. Tell Marcus to bring her up, Claire said. Give me 5 minutes first. She used the 5 minutes in the narrow hospital bathroom, running cold water over her wrists, looking at her own face in the mirror. She looked like someone who had been awake for 23 hours and had spent most of them in crisis. She looked nothing like someone who was about to walk out and face the person who had spent 8 months shaping the story of her life without her consent. She dried her hands. She walked back into the room. Sophia came in 2 minutes later. She looked different than she had at 7 a.m. The professional composure still present, but sitting on a framework that had been under stress for several hours. Her coat was off, draped over her arm. She had a coffee cup in her hand, half empty. She looked at Claire, then at Daniel with Lillian, then back at Claire with an expression that recalibrated quickly, but not quite fast enough. You wanted to talk, Sophia said. Sit down, Claire said. Same words Vincent had used. Same room, different dynamic. Sophia sat. I have a text message, Claire said. She picked up her original phone, her own, not the new one, because the text was there. And she turned it to face Sophia. From your number, sent 8 months ago, 8 days after you came to my apartment. She watched Sophia's eyes move to the screen. It says, I hope you're well. The offer stands. Sophia's face went carefully still. That message, Claire said, is from your personal number to mine. It confirms that you contacted me independently, after the apartment visit, without Vincent's knowledge. She set the phone down. If you're telling Marchetti that the document was prepared with Vincent's full knowledge and consent, then this message is a problem for your version of events, because it shows you reaching out to his ex-wife privately in connection with a decision he was supposedly directing. She paused. It shows you acting alone. Sophia put her coffee cup on the floor beside the chair. That's interesting, she said. Her voice was neutral, professional, but her right hand, Claire noticed, had tightened around the cup handle before she set it down. I want to make you an offer, Claire said. Not Vincent's offer, mine. Sophia waited. You're going to contact your attorney, today. You're going to instruct them to notify Marchetti's representation that the documentation you provided was prepared without the subject's knowledge and may not accurately represent the communications it purports to document. She kept her voice even. Clinical. The same tone Sophia had used in her kitchen 8 months ago because she had learned from it. In exchange, I will not provide this text to Vincent's attorney, to federal investigators, or to anyone else. It stays on my phone and does nothing. Sophia looked at her. And if I don't, she said, then Vincent's attorney gets the text, Claire said, which gives them something to work with, which makes your position with Marchetti significantly more complicated because you've handed them a document that your own communications undermine. She held Sophia's gaze. You're good at building protection, Sophia. You came here this morning with what you thought was a complete position, but you left a message on my phone 8 months ago because you thought I was going to disappear, and I didn't disappear, and that's the thing you didn't account for. The room was very quiet. Lillian, in Daniel's arms, had fallen asleep again. Sophia looked at Claire for a long moment with an expression that Claire finally recognized. It was the look of someone revising their assessment of another person. Not warmly, not with admiration, but genuinely. The look of recalculation, of updating a model that had been operating on insufficient data. You were never as frightened as I thought you were, Sophia said. I was terrified, Claire said. I still am. That's not the same thing as being manageable. Something shifted in Sophia's expression. She picked up her coffee. She looked at Lillian sleeping in Daniel's arms. The dark eyelashes, the small curled fist, the chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of an infant whose fever is breaking and who does not yet know the name of a single person in the room, but has, in the course of one night, become the fixed point around which every other thing is orbiting. "I'll need specific language," Sophia said quietly, "for the retraction." "Vincent's attorney can draft it," Claire said. "Today." A pause. "And the text," Sophia said. "You'll delete it." "When the retraction is filed and Marchetti's attorney confirms receipt," Claire said. "Not before." Sophia looked at her one more time, long, assessing. Then she stood up, retrieved her coat from her arm, and said, "Tell Vincent's attorney to call me by noon." She walked to the door. She stopped, one hand on the frame, her back to the room. "For what it's worth," she said, and her voice had dropped out of every professional register, down to something that was just tired and flat and possibly true. "I didn't think she would be real to me. I looked at the variables and I saw a variable. I didn't think—" She stopped. "She's real." She left. Daniel let out a breath that sounded like it had been held since Sophia walked in. "Vincent needs to know that happened," he said. "Call him," Claire said. She sat down in the chair beside the crib. Vincent's chair, the one he'd occupied all night. And she put her hands flat on her thighs and looked at Lillian's sleeping face and felt the exhaustion move through her in a long, slow wave, the kind that comes when something you've been braced against finally stops pushing. Her phone, the new one, buzzed. "Vincent." She picked up before the second buzz. "Daniel's calling you," she said. "I know, he texted." A pause. "You negotiated with Sophia?" "Yes." "Using the text message?" "Yes." A silence. Not the operational kind. Not the strategic kind. "Claire," he said. "She's going to retract it," Claire said. "You need your attorney to draft the language and get it to her by noon. That's the window." "I know. I heard." Another pause. "Are you all right?" She thought about it honestly. "I will be," she said. "That's not— It's the answer I have right now," she said. And she heard him make a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was something in that direction, brief and tired and almost warm. "I'll be there by 2, he said. "Before the doctor's rounds." "Okay." "Claire." "What?" He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was at its lowest register, the one that didn't perform anything, didn't manage anything, just said the thing it was saying. "She was reaching for my face this morning," he said. "Lillian, when she woke up." "I know," Claire said. "I saw." "I keep thinking about that." She looked at her daughter sleeping in her uncle's arms and felt something in her chest that had no clean name. Not forgiveness, not yet, not resolution, not safety, not anything with a single word attached to it. "Come at 2, she said. "She'll be awake." She ended the call. Outside the window, the Boston morning had gone fully bright, the kind of sharp winter brightness that came after snow when everything was white, and the light hit it directly, and the whole city looked temporary and clean and not quite real, the way things looked when you'd been awake long enough that the world had started to feel like something you were observing from a slight distance rather than living inside. Daniel looked at her from across the room. "You should sleep," he said. "I know," she said. She didn't sleep. She sat in the chair and watched her daughter's chest rise and fall, and held the new phone in her hands and waited for something, she couldn't have said what exactly, to settle into its final shape. At 1:47 p.m., Sophia Reynolds' attorney called Vincent's attorney and confirmed the retraction language was acceptable. At 1:59 p.m., Vincent walked back through the door of room 307 with his coat over his arm and his tie gone, and the specific quality of exhaustion that lived on the other side of a crisis that had been managed but not yet processed. He looked at Claire. She looked at him. Lillian, awake in this hospital crib, registered the new presence in the room and turned her head and found his face, and her arm came up. The reaching gesture, fingers spread, aimed directly at him from 18 inches away. Vincent crossed to the crib and reached in and let her grip his finger without being asked. He looked at Claire over his daughter's head. "The attorney says the retraction was filed at 1:50, he said. "I know," she said. He texted me. A pause. Marchetti's people received it at 1:54, he said. They've gone quiet. For now, she said. For now, he agreed. He looked down at Lillian, who was holding his finger with both hands now, her full attention on this object she had decided was hers. We're not finished, he said. There's more to untangle. The organization, the exposure, I know, Claire said. It could take months to actually… Vincent. She looked at him directly, across the small space of a hospital room that had held everything in the last 18 hours. I know. We'll deal with it. She paused. One thing at a time. He looked at her. He looked at Lillian. He pulled the chair close to the crib. His chair, the one he'd found first. And he sat down, and he let his daughter hold his finger, and the monitors reported her vitals in small green numbers. And outside the window, Boston was white and still, and the afternoon light was beginning to shift toward the particular gold of a winter afternoon, heading toward dark. And Claire sat in her chair and watched the man she had left and the daughter she had kept, and felt the shape of what came next. Begin, slowly, incompletely, to take form. The door opened. The doctor came in for afternoon rounds with a clipboard and a professional brightness that had survived the full shift, and she looked at the monitors, and she looked at Lillian, and she looked at the readings, and she said, "So, temperature is 99.8. She looked up. I think we can talk about going home tomorrow morning, she said. The doctor left the discharge paperwork on the table beside the crib and said she'd check back in the morning, and the door closed, and the three of them were alone again in room 307 with the monitors and the white Boston afternoon and the specific silence of people who have been through something together and are still inside it. Lillian had fallen asleep again during the doctor's visit, the way infants do. No transition, no warning, just present one moment and then simply gone into sleep the next, her grip on Vincent's finger loosening by degrees until he was able to gently free it without waking her. He sat with his hand resting on the crib rail. Claire sat in her chair. Daniel, reading something in the particular quality of the room, stood up and said he needed coffee and was gone for the kind of absence that was clearly meant to be extended. The room was quiet for a while. Tomorrow morning, Claire said. Yeah. I need to call my neighbor tonight. She has a key. She's been checking the heat. I'll need her to get the apartment ready. She was thinking practically because practical was the available mode. I'll need to get her formula, her usual formula. The hospital used a different brand. She's been okay with it, but she prefers… There's a specific one she prefers. Tell me the brand, Vincent said. She looked at him. I'll have someone get it, he said. Tonight, so it's there when you arrive. Tell me what she needs. She almost told him she could handle it. She almost said it was fine. She'd stop on the way home from the hospital. She had a system. 8 months of solo logistics had produced excellent systems. She said, it's the blue label and Famil Gentlies. There's also a specific pacifier she likes. It's green. There are 3 of them in the drawer next to her crib. She'll lose her mind without them. He took out his phone and typed it. She watched him type it. A man who had spent the day managing a federal exposure situation and a 9-year professional betrayal and the emotional architecture of meeting his daughter for the first time, typing a formula brand and a pacifier color into his notes. Vincent, she said. He looked up. What happens now to the organization? She kept her voice level. I need to understand what we're actually dealing with. Not the version you'd give a room, the real version. He set his phone down. He leaned back in the chair, slightly, just enough to signal that he was shifting into honest, and he looked at the window, and then at Lillian, and then at Claire. The retraction takes the immediate pressure off, he said. Marchetti's people have gone quiet because the document's integrity is now compromised. Without Sophia's cooperation in presenting it as legitimate, it's her word against mine about what it represents, and her credibility is, she undermined it this morning by coming here, by the text message, by the apartment visit that is now documented from your end. But the underlying situation doesn't disappear, Claire said. No. He was quiet for a moment. The negotiation happened. I walked away from it for the reasons I walked away. Marchetti's grievance is real, even if the documentation of it was manipulated. He has people and resources and a long memory, and the retraction doesn't change any of that. So you're still exposed. Differently exposed, he said. The legal threat is substantially reduced. The personal threat… He paused. Marchetti is not impulsive. He'll look at the new situation and calculate. He'll decide whether the cost of moving against me outweighs the potential gain. That calculation it's not favorable to him right now. But calculations change, which means Lillian is still... I know, he said, before she could finish it. I know. The silence that followed was not comfortable, but it was honest, and she had spent enough of her life around comfortable silences that covered dishonest things that she preferred this. I've been thinking, he said slowly, about what you said last night. That if I want to be her father, I have to earn it, through patience and consistency, and those were your words. They were. You also said, not fear, money, or authority. He looked at his hands. I've been turning that over, because the way my life is structured, fear and authority and money are the instruments. They're how things get done. They're how people are protected. He paused. And I know, sitting in this room, that none of those things are going to work here. With her. With you. He looked up. I'm not sure I know how to be someone they don't work for. You're going to have to learn, Claire said. I know. And you'll get it wrong, she said. A lot. You'll make decisions without asking. You'll deploy people like Marcus when you should just call me. You'll try to solve things with resources when the thing I need is to be consulted. Probably, he said. Definitely, she said. Not unkindly, just as a fact the way he'd said his own hard facts. And I'm going to hold line every time. I'm not going to manage around it the way I did in the marriage. When you do it, I'm going to tell you directly. Okay? And you're going to have to hear it without... She searched for the word. Without retreating. Without going into management mode and processing it at a distance. You're going to have to actually hear it. He held her gaze. That's harder for me. I know, she said. I know it is. I'm telling you it's the requirement. He nodded once, slowly. The way he nodded when he was committing to something rather than agreeing with it, which was a distinction she'd learned to read early in their history and had never forgotten. And the organization, she said, I'm not going to tell you what to do with it. That's not my life. But I need to know, clearly, not managed, not framed, what Lillian is growing up adjacent to, what the actual risk profile is, not the version that's been optimized to not alarm me. He was quiet for a long moment. The honest version, he said finally, is that it's not safe. It will never be entirely safe. There are people like Marchetti who will always view the people close to me as potential leverage points. He looked at Lillian. I've been thinking since this morning, since I drove here last night, about what it would look like to change the structure. Not overnight, not dramatically, but to begin moving away from the things that create the most exposure, the things that can't be made legitimate. Have you thought about that before? She said. Or is this new? I've thought about a version of it, he said carefully. Not with her in the picture. He looked at Lillian again. She changes the math. She changes your willingness to do the math, Claire said. A pause. Yes, he said. That's more accurate. She looked at him for a long moment. At the exhaustion in his face, the unshaved jaw, the specific quality of a man who has been through 24 hours that have rearranged something fundamental and is still feeling the rearrangement. I'm not asking you to dismantle everything overnight, she said. I'm not asking you to become someone you're not. I'm asking you to be honest with me about what's real and to make decisions with her safety as the actual priority, not the stated priority. There's a difference, he said. In your world, there has been a significant difference, she said. He took that without deflecting it. Let it land. She watched him let it land, and something in her chest shifted slightly. Not forgiveness, not yet. Not the clean-edged resolution that was available in simpler stories, but something more complicated and possibly more durable. The recognition that this man, in this chair, at the end of this specific night and day, was not performing contrition. He was just sitting with the weight of things. I need to sleep, she said. Sleep, he said. I'll be here. You've been here all night. And all day. He settled back in the chair. I'm not going anywhere. She believed him. She reclined the chair as far as it went, not far, and she closed her eyes, and she was asleep within minutes, which she would not have predicted possible. But the body makes its own decisions when the adrenaline finally clears. She slept for 3 hours. When she woke, the room was in the golden shadow light of late afternoon. the window holding the last of the daylight before the Boston January dark arrived. Lillian was awake in the crib, not crying, just alert, making the small conversational sounds she made when she was content and had thoughts to express. Vincent was sitting beside her, talking to her, not performing talking to a baby, actually talking to her, quietly, in his normal voice, slightly slower than he'd talk to an adult, telling her something about the snow outside, about how it had been falling when he drove in and the roads were going to be. And he stopped when he noticed Claire watching. "She's been awake for about 30 minutes, he said. She didn't fuss. "She's social in the late afternoon," Claire said. She sat up, running both hands through her hair. "She likes to have someone to talk at." "She's been talking back," he said. Not a joke, just reporting what he'd experienced. Claire looked at Lillian, who had redirected her conversational attention to the overhead light with the easy flexibility of someone who has multiple acceptable audiences. "Did your attorney call?" Claire said. "3 times. I stepped out twice, handled it in the corridor." He handed her the water bottle from the bedside table. It was full, she noticed, which meant he'd refilled it at some point. The retraction held. Marchetti's attorney sent a 2-line response acknowledging receipt and reserving all rights, which is lawyer for "we're backing off, but we're not admitting it." "And Sophia?" He was quiet for a moment. "She signed the retraction, cleanly, no conditions. My attorney says she seemed—" He paused. He said she seemed tired. Claire thought about what Sophia had said at the door. "She's real." The specific exhausted texture of it. "What happens to her?" Claire said. "She no longer works for me," Vincent said. "Her access is revoked. Her standing in the organization is gone. That's permanent." He looked at his hands. "I'm not going to pursue anything beyond that. She did real damage. But she spent 9 years doing real service too. I can hold both things." "Can you?" Claire said. "I'm trying to," he said. I'm not there yet. But I understand that she made decisions from a place of... She had a role that meant everything to her, and she was protecting it the only way she knew how. That doesn't make it right. It makes it..." He stopped. "Human, in the worst way, but human." Claire looked at him. "That's generous," she said. "No," he said. "It's practical. If I burn everything I'm angry at, I'll be in the dark." He paused. "I have a daughter. I need to see where I'm going." The night nurse came in at 6 to check Lillian's vitals and bring the evening medication schedule, and she noted the temperature at 99.2 with the satisfied efficiency of someone whose work is producing visible results. She said the doctor would sign the discharge paperwork first thing, and they should be able to leave by 9 in the morning, and she said it to both of them equally, which was a small thing that wasn't small. Daniel came back at 6:30 with food, actual food, from a restaurant 3 blocks away. The kind of insulated bags that meant someone had put thought into it. He distributed containers and sat in the chair against the wall, the one that had been Claire's for the last 24 hours. And for a while the 3 of them ate in the hospital room with Lillian in the crib between them in the amber lamplight while Boston went dark outside the window. It should have been strange. It wasn't, entirely. That was its own kind of information. "She looks better," Daniel said, watching Lillian. "Her color. She looked pale last night." "She was running 104, Claire said. She held it together, though." He said it simply, seriously. "Tougher than she looks." "She's tougher than everyone in this room," Claire said. Daniel grinned. Vincent, across the crib, didn't smile exactly, but something in his face did. At 8 p.m., Claire called Rachel. She took the call in the corridor, leaning against the wall outside room 307, and she told her sister everything, not the organization details, not the Marchetti specifics, but the structure of it. That Vincent was here. That he'd been here all night. That he knew about Lillian and had known for less than 24 hours and had not left the hospital in that time, except to manage an emergency that she had helped him manage. Rachel was quiet for most of this. "Are you okay?" Rachel said. Claire stopped. "I'm not sure yet. I think so. Ask me in a week." "Do you need me to come?" "No. She's being discharged tomorrow. I just wanted you to know." A pause. "I wanted someone who knows me to know." "I know you," Rachel said. "I also know that man. Or I know enough about him." "What do you know?" Claire said carefully. "I know that you left that marriage for real reasons," Rachel said. "Not because you didn't love him. Because loving him was costing you things you couldn't afford to keep paying. Claire stood in the corridor and breathed. Yeah, she said. And I know, Rachel said more carefully, that you called him last night. Not your neighbor, not me, not Dana. Him. For the medical history. For the medical history, Rachel said. The specific tone of a sister who believes you and is also noting the rest of the information available. We're going to co-parent, Claire said. That's what this is. That's what we're building. Not, she stopped. Not anything else. Okay, Rachel said. I mean it. I believe you, Rachel said. I also believe it's more complicated than that phrase, and I think you know it's more complicated than that phrase, and I think that's something to carry carefully. When did you get wise? Claire said. I've always been wise. You've been distracted. Claire exhaled. Something in her chest loosened that had been tightened since before she could remember. Come see her next weekend, Claire said. Come see Lillian. I'll be there Saturday, Rachel said. Bring good coffee. Hospital food has done something to your standards. She went back into the room. Vincent looked up when she came in. Daniel had fallen asleep in the chair against the wall. Genuinely asleep, his head tilted back, the boneless sleep of a man who'd been running on adrenaline for most of the day and had simply stopped. She almost said something about it. She looked at Daniel, and she looked at Vincent, and she understood in that moment that this was a version of how it had always been. Vincent awake when everyone else stopped, present when the room quieted, the last one standing in every room he'd ever been in. She sat back down in her chair. My sister wants to meet Lillian, she said. Good, he said. She's not going to make it easy for you, Rachel. I know. She's protective. She should be, he said. She watched you leave a marriage that wasn't working. She's going to look at me like whatever I am until I prove otherwise. He paused. That's fine. I understand the position. You're very calm about earning back trust from people who have reasons not to give it. I'm not calm, he said. I'm committed. They're different. She looked at him across the crib, at Lillian between them, moving into the drowsy pre-sleep stage, eyes half closed, the specific heavy satisfaction of an infant who has eaten and been warm and heard voices she's decided she can trust. I need to tell you something, Claire said. She said it carefully, because she'd been carrying it since sometime around 3 in the morning, and she hadn't known if she was going to say it, and now she'd decided. When Sophia came to the apartment, and I told you I believed her for about a week. He waited. The thing that made me stop believing her, Claire said, wasn't logic. It wasn't that the story didn't add up. It was... She paused. She said you knew and had decided not to care. And I knew, sitting with that I didn't believe it. Not because you're a good person, necessarily. Not because our marriage was... She stopped. I didn't believe it because you always cared about everything inside your circle. That was never the problem. The problem was the size of the circle, and who got to be in it and at what cost. But you never, in 12 years, decided not to care about something close to you. She looked at Lillian. I knew that if you'd known about her, you would have cared. I knew that before I even sat with it consciously. He was very still. So part of the reason I didn't call you, she said, wasn't just what you'd said about not wanting children. Part of it was, I knew that if I told you, you would care. And caring, for you, means organizing, protecting, making decisions. She exhaled. And I wasn't ready to stop making them myself. The room held that. That's fair, he said slowly. It's honest, she said. It might not be fair to you. It's both, he said. I know what I am. I know how I operate. The caring and the control. He stopped. I know they come from the same place. I've known that for a long time. I haven't always known what to do with it. What do you do with it now? She said. He looked at Lillian. I let her make her own decisions, he said, for as long as possible, for as long as she's safe. A pause. And I stay present enough that she knows the difference between being protected and being controlled. So she never has to learn it the way... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Claire looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. He looked at her. Okay, she said again, and she didn't elaborate because she didn't have clean words for it yet, for whatever this was. This specific thing she was extending across the crib. Not forgiveness as a declaration, not reconciliation as an event, but something more like the opening of a door into a room that neither of them had been in before. Lillian sighed in her sleep. It was the most ordinary sound in the world. The morning arrived the way hospital mornings arrive, in pieces, incrementally, the building waking around them before the room had quite finished being night. Claire was awake at 6:40, though she hadn't intended to be. She'd slept in the reclining chair again, and her neck registered a complaint about this that was going to persist for several days, and she thought, I need to buy a better chair for the apartment, for if this happens again, for if he visits and she's sleeping and we're both... And she stopped herself on the middle of that thought because it was too many things forward from where they actually were. Vincent was awake. He'd slept, she thought. There had been a period around midnight when he'd gone quiet and still in a way that suggested sleep. But he was awake now, and the night nurse had removed some of the monitoring equipment in the early hours as Lillian's vitals held steady, and Lillian was asleep in the crib with the IV line gone, and just the simple, untethered fact of herself, sleeping the way she'd slept in her own crib at home, arms up, head turned slightly to the right, the position she'd apparently decided was her position early in life and had not since reconsidered. She's a side sleeper, Vincent said. She's a defender, Claire said, arms up, like she's ready for whatever comes next. A pause. Yeah, he said. Daniel had gone home at some point in the night. There was a text on Claire's phone from 2 a.m. that said she's doing great, you're doing great, Vincent call me tomorrow, and that was Daniel, the efficiency of affection. The breakfast tray arrived. Claire ate mechanically and efficiently because she'd learned in 8 months that the machine needed fuel regardless of what the circumstances were. Vincent ate half of something and pushed the tray aside and drank the coffee, which Claire understood. Hospital coffee was genuinely terrible, and he drank it anyway because his body needed something to run on. At 8:15, the doctor came. The discharge was clean, temperature 99.1, lungs clear, feeding normally, all the indicators moving in the right direction with the uncomplicated certainty of an infant's resilience, which was its own kind of thing, the way the young recovered, fast and complete, and without the residue that the same illness left in older bodies. Follow up with her pediatrician in 48 hours, the doctor said. Keep her warm, keep her hydrated, watch for any return of high fever. RSV can occasionally have a secondary phase in very young infants, so don't hesitate to come back if anything concerns you. She looked at both of them. She's a strong girl. She did well. She has opinions, Vincent said. The doctor smiled. It reached her eyes. The best ones do. She left. Claire began gathering the things that had accumulated in the room over 24 hours. The bag she'd packed in the frantic speed of Tuesday night, the extra clothes she'd grabbed, the bottles. Lillian's specific blanket that she'd had the presence of mind to bring, because Lillian was particular about blankets. She moved around the room with the efficient choreography of someone executing a familiar task under unfamiliar conditions, and Vincent moved around her without being asked, holding things when it was helpful, staying out of the way when it wasn't, learning the rhythm of it without requiring instruction. She noticed him learning it. She didn't say anything. She let him learn it. The dressing of Lillian was a production, because Lillian had recovered sufficient energy and opinion to resist having her arms threaded through sleeves, which she had always found objectionable on principle. She said so at volume. Vincent held her while Claire managed the winter outfit, the small coat, the hat she kept pulling off, the boots that were mostly decorative but that Claire's mother had sent, and that made Claire's heart hurt a little to look at, because her mother had sent them without knowing that her granddaughter was in the hospital, without knowing any of the 24 hours that had just happened. She's very loud, Vincent said, not unhappily, holding Lillian slightly away from his body with the careful incompetence of someone who was learning the logistics in real time. She has things to say, Claire said, about the coat. About all of it. The coat, the hat, the fact of Tuesday. The general situation. He adjusted his hold, shifted her closer, which was counterintuitive but correct, because Lillian settled slightly when held closer, the complaint dropping in volume though not in commitment. There, he said, quietly, as if he'd figured something out. She likes to feel contained, Claire said. Not constrained, contained. There's a difference, he said. Yes. He held his daughter against his chest with his coat slightly open around her, and she looked out at the room from this new elevation with the specific expression of someone conducting an evaluation of their circumstances. The transport wheelchair arrived, hospital policy, regardless of ambulatory status, and Claire sat in it with Lillian in her arms, and the orderly pushed them toward the elevator, and Vincent walked beside them carrying the bag and the extra blanket and the small hospital-issue stuffed animal that Lillian had apparently decided was acceptable because she was holding it with both hands and the matter was settled. The lobby was ordinary, busy with the morning business of a hospital, arrivals, departures, families with the specific expressions of people who have been through something and are processing the aftermath in the fluorescent light of the exit corridor. Nobody looked at them. Nobody recognized Vincent, or if they did, they made the decision that people in hospitals make, which is that whatever is happening around them is not their business. Marcus was at the door. He had the car. He held the door without expression, professional as water. Outside, Boston was cold and clear and white, the snow still covering everything from 2 days before. The January air arriving with the flat certainty of a month that makes no promises. Claire stood on the hospital sidewalk with Lillian and breathed it in. The cold, the outside, the specific feeling of being on the other side of a thing that had been survived. The car seat was already in the car. She looked at it, then at Vincent. "You," she said. He looked at her. "You had someone get it," she said. "Last night," he said. "It matches her weight and height. I got the specifications from the hospital intake form." She stood with that for a moment. The intake form. He had read the hospital intake form and obtained a matching car seat and had it installed in his car by, she didn't know when, sometime during the night, sometime between calls and crises, and sitting in a chair watching his daughter breathe. "Infamil gentlis," she said. "In the trunk," he said, "and the green pacifiers, 3 of them." She looked at him for a long moment in the cold January morning outside Boston Children's Hospital. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything either. She got in the car. The drive to her apartment was 20 minutes. Lillian fell asleep before they cleared the hospital block, the motion of the car doing what motion always did, and the car was quiet the way cars are quiet when there's a sleeping infant involved, a negotiated quiet, conscious and careful. Vincent drove. Claire sat in his back with Lillian because the rear-facing seat required supervision, and she wanted to watch her daughter's face in the daylight, the untroubled breathing, the color that was back in her cheeks. "My neighborhood," Claire said when he turned. "You know the route." "I've driven past," he said. "Not stopped. Just driven past." "Once," he said. "Maybe twice." She thought about what it meant that a man who had been told he had no reason to be there had driven past anyway, maybe twice, because some instinct she didn't have a name for had pulled him in that direction. She let it be information without deciding what kind. The apartment building was a 3-story brownstone with a buzzer system and a neighbor named Mrs. Castellano on the first floor who kept unusual hours and knew everything that happened in the building with the passive omniscience of someone who had nowhere else to be. Mrs. Castellano had a key. Mrs. Castellano had texted at 7 a.m. "Heat is on. I put milk in the fridge. Is everything okay with the baby?" Claire had texted back, "Better. Coming home this morning. Thank you." Vincent parked. He carried the bag. Claire carried Lillian. They went up the stairs. The elevator was out, had been out for 3 weeks. Maintenance had been contacted. And at the second-floor landing, he was carrying the bag and her overnight case and the hospital blanket, and he was managing the stairs with more competence than she expected, and she thought, he's been in buildings with broken elevators. He knows stairs. This is not new to him. The apartment was warm. The heat was on, as Mrs. Castellano had promised, and the afternoon light was coming through the kitchen window the way it always came at this time of day, at this angle, making the small kitchen look deliberately pleasant. There were dishes in the drying rack from 2 days ago. There was a half-full coffee pot from Tuesday morning that she hadn't finished because Lillian had been fussy, and then the temperature had started. Vincent stood in the entry holding the bag and looked at the apartment. She watched him look at it. The photographs on the wall. Lillian at 3 months, Lillian at 6 months, Lillian asleep on a hospital blanket the day she was born because Claire had needed that photograph the way she needed air. The corner with the bouncy seat and the playmat and the organized chaos of infant equipment that had colonized the living room corner with cheerful inevitability. The bookshelf with his baby books. And the novels she'd been working through 1 chapter at a time at night when Lillian slept. however many chapters she could manage before she fell asleep herself. The apartment that was the whole life she'd built. He looked at it for a long time. "It's good," he said, quietly. "It's a good place for her." She put Lillian down in the crib in the small bedroom, her own room, which Claire had converted, sleeping herself on the pullout in the living room with the monitor beside her head, a configuration that was temporary and had been temporary for 8 months. She tucked the blanket. She stood at the crib rail and watched the breathing, the steady, uncomplicated, RSV retreating, simply present breathing. She stood there longer than she needed to. When she came back into the living room, Vincent was in the kitchen. He had put water on. He had found the coffee. She kept it in the cabinet above the machine, the only sensible place. And he was in the process of making it with the easy familiarity of someone who has been in enough kitchens to know how kitchens work. And she stood in the doorway and watched him, and didn't say stop. "She's asleep," Claire said. "Good." She sat at the kitchen table. He put a cup in front of her and sat across from her with his own. And they drank coffee at her kitchen table in the winter afternoon. And neither of them said anything for a little while. And it wasn't comfortable exactly, but it was real. And she had decided somewhere in the last 24 hours that she would take real over comfortable. "I want to say something," he said. She waited. "I know what I cost you," he said. I'm not going to make a speech about it. But I want you to know I understand it, not in the abstract. The parking garage. The first year. The decisions you had to make alone, not because of what I did, but because of what I said I wanted, what I made you believe was true about my position. And it turned out it wasn't true, or it wasn't fully true, and by the time the truth caught up, he stopped. You were already in the parking garage. She held her coffee with both hands. "I know," she said. "I can't fix it," he said. "I'm not going to try to frame it as something fixable. It happened. She exists in spite of it, which is..." He looked at his hands. "I don't have a word for what that is. I'm going to spend a long time thinking about what that is." "You don't have to have a word for it," she said. "I know. You just have to show up," she said. "That's the whole requirement. Boring and consistent and present. Tuesday afternoons and Saturday mornings, and the pediatrician and the nights she has a fever, and the..." She stopped, smiled slightly without meaning to. "The opinions about the coat." He exhaled. "I can do that," he said. "You don't know yet," she said. Not unkindly. "You think you can. You'll find out." "Fair," he said. They drank their coffee. The afternoon light moved across the kitchen floor. "The organization," she said. "You talked about changing the structure." "Yes." "What does that actually look like? Not the promise version, the version where it's hard and slow and people push back." He thought about it honestly, which she could tell because he took time with it. "There are parts of what we operate that can be made legitimate," he said slowly. "Have been moving that direction already. Real estate, logistics, consulting structures. Those can be cleaned completely. It takes time and the right legal architecture, but it's possible." He paused. "The parts that can't be cleaned, I have to walk away from them. Which means some people who have depended on those operations for income and standing are going to have to find new arrangements. Which means pressure from inside, not just from Marchetti." "And you do it anyway," she said. "And I do it anyway," he said, "because the alternative is that she grows up in the shadow of it, and I've seen what that shadow does to children. I've watched it." He stopped. Something moved through his face that was older than anything she'd seen there in 24 hours. "I've watched it take things from people. I'm not going to let it take things from her." She looked at him across the small kitchen table. This man who had walked into a hospital 27 hours ago, not knowing he had a daughter, and was sitting here now talking about dismantling the empire he'd spent 20 years building because a 9-month-old girl had grabbed his finger. "It's going to take time," she said. "Years," he agreed. "Probably." "During which she is growing up." "Yes." "During which you are..." She chose the word carefully. "Adjacent to her life. Present in it. In the ways we establish." "Yes," he said. "And we need rules," she said. "We talked about this. Real ones." "Yes." "I'm going to write them down," she said. "Not as a legal document, just as what we've agreed to, what the expectations are. So there's no room for..." She paused. "For the kind of drift that happens when things are left implicit." "That's reasonable," he said. I know it's reasonable, she said. I'm not asking if it's reasonable. I'm telling you it's happening. Something moved through his face, not amusement, not quite, but in that direction. The slightly helpless expression of a man who has encountered someone who has had 8 months to develop a comprehensive system and is going to be operating that system with or without his input. Okay, he said. Saturday mornings, she said. I'm thinking Saturday mornings to start. Consistent, same time, here or a neutral place. Depending on how she responds. Infants track consistency before they track faces. The rhythm matters more than the location. I know you know more about this than I do, he said. I'm going to follow your lead. You're going to try to follow my lead, she said. He acknowledged this distinction. Holidays, she said. We'll figure out the specific arrangement later, but I want to establish the principle now. She doesn't get her holidays halved. She gets the whole thing. We figure out how to both be present for the major ones without whatever complicated thing it is when two people are in the same room who have a history. We had holidays, he said, in the marriage. We were in the same room. We were, she said. And we can be again. For her. She looked at him steadily. I'm not suggesting anything other than what I'm saying. I'm saying she gets whole holidays. Agreed, he said. Medical decisions, she said. Joint, from now on, both of us. The pediatrician gets both names, both contacts. If there's ever a situation like Tuesday night, I call you and we make decisions together. Not you making them and telling me after. Agreed. School, she said. Years away, but I'm establishing the principle. We discuss and agree. You don't enroll her somewhere. You don't make a decision about her education unilaterally because you have resources to make it happen, and I don't. He held her gaze. Agreed. Marcus, she said. He waited. I understand the security reality, she said. I'm not naive about it, but I need to know when he's present. Not a text after the fact, a conversation before. That one, he said carefully, is going to be the hardest one for me to consistently manage. I know, she said. That's why I'm naming it specifically. He nodded slowly. I'll try, he said. And when I get it wrong, tell me directly. I will, she said. You can count on it. They sat in that for a moment. Is there anything else for today? He said. She thought about it. Go home, she said. Sleep. You've been in a hospital chair for 20 hours and you look like something that got left out in the weather. She said it without cruelty, just factually. Come Saturday. There's no need to bring anything. Just come. He looked at her. Claire, he said. What? He seemed to be choosing something. Looking at her across the kitchen table with the expression of a man who has things he could say and is deciding which of them are for now and which are for later and which are for a version of things that doesn't exist yet. Thank you, he said, for calling me. She needed her father's medical history, Claire said. Yeah, he said, that's why you called. She looked at him, at his face in the winter afternoon light, tired and present and not performing anything. Go home, Vincent, she said. He stood. He picked up his coat. He looked at the hallway toward the small bedroom where Lillian was asleep. Can I? He stopped. Go look, she said. He went to the doorway of the bedroom and stood there. She didn't follow him. She sat at the table and listened to the particular quality of the apartment's silence, the specific silence of a place that had been one kind of thing and was in the process of becoming another, slowly, imperfectly, without any guarantee of outcome. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. She heard nothing from the bedroom. Lillian was asleep, and whatever was happening was just a man standing at the threshold of a room where his daughter was sleeping, learning what that was. He came back. He went to the door. He stood there with his coat and said, without turning around, Saturday. Saturday, she said. He left. She sat at the kitchen table and listened to the building settle around her. The heat ticking in the radiator. Mrs. Castellano's television through the floor, indistinct. The winter afternoon pressing against the windows with its cold and its specific January light that always felt to her like the light of things being considered rather than resolved. She thought about Rachel coming Saturday with good coffee. She thought about the green pacifiers in the bag by the door. She thought about the intake form, that he had read the intake form. She got up and washed the coffee cups and put them in the drying rack and went to the window and looked at the street below, where the snow was still clean at the edges and people were moving through it, with the bundled determination of people living inside a cold month, heads down, the particular kinetic pragmatism of a city that doesn't stop for weather. Lillian's monitor made a sound from the bedroom, the beginning of waking, the pre-fuss inventory of sounds she made before committing to consciousness. Claire dried her hands on the dish towel and went to her daughter. Lillian was awake, arms up, the defender position, looking at the ceiling with the focused, serious expression of someone assembling information about their current situation. She turned her head when Claire appeared at the crib rail. She looked at her mother's face. Something in her expression settled. Claire reached into the crib and picked her up, and Lillian oriented immediately to the familiar warmth and weight of her, and Claire stood in the small bedroom of the apartment they had built together, the two of them, over 8 months and 1,000 ordinary days, and she held her daughter in the winter afternoon and thought about nothing for a little while. Just the weight, just the breathing, just this. Outside, the snow held on. The streets were white, and the light was failing toward evening, and somewhere across the city, a man who had spent 20 years building an empire that ran on fear was driving home to begin the long, unglamorous, non-negotiable work of becoming something different. Not transformed, not redeemed in any clean cinematic sense. Just accountable, willing, showing up on Saturday mornings, and learning the coat situation and reading intake forms at midnight, and accepting that the most important thing he would ever protect could not be protected by any of the instruments he'd mastered, that it required something he was just beginning to understand. Claire sat in the rocking chair with Lillian as the room went to dusk. She didn't turn on the light for a while. She let the dark come gradually, the way it always did in winter, honest and unhurried, and she rocked her daughter in the gathering dark and thought, "We survived Tuesday. We survived all of it. That's enough for today." She turned on the lamp. Lillian, in her arms, looked at the light with the ancient, serious attention of someone encountering brightness for the first time, even though it was not the first time, even though it was only the ordinary lamp in the corner of the ordinary bedroom of the life they were living. She looked at it like it was new. Claire looked at her. "Yeah," she said softly. "I know." She held her daughter as the evening settled over Boston, quiet and cold, and full of everything that was still to come.